Hey everyone and welcome. Today we're diving into a secret. Not some wild conspiracy theory, but a truly powerful idea that flipped our whole understanding of control on its head. We're talking about how power really works in our world.
So, let's just ask the big question right up front. How do the people at the top stay at the top? Now, the obvious answer is force, right? Police, armies, the law. But what if I told you that's just the tip of the iceberg? What if the real secret is something way more subtle, something that happens inside our own heads?
Okay, so think about it like this. On one hand, you have the old school answer. Power is force. It's the threat of punishment that keeps everyone in line. But then there's this other kind of mind-bending idea. Power through consent. What if the most effective way to rule isn't to force people, but to get them to willingly, even happily, accept the system as it is?
To really get where this new idea came from, we've actually got to look at a huge puzzle that had a lot of thinkers scratching their heads, especially the classical Marxists.
Now, the traditional Marxist view was pretty direct. They saw the capitalist state as, well, basically a weapon. It wasn't some neutral referee. They saw it as the managing committee for the ruling class, the bourgeoisie. Its whole job was to use force to protect the wealthy, keep class conflict down, and make sure the system served the interests of property owners.
And that leads us to the giant puzzle. If the state was just a tool of oppression and capitalism was so unfair, why weren't workers in places like Britain, France, and America rising up? Marx had predicted revolutions, but in the developed West, the system seems surprisingly stable. Why?
The answer to that puzzle would come from the last place you'd expect, a fascist prison cell. It was in there that one brilliant Italian thinker had a lot of time to think, and he used it to completely re-examine the nature of power itself.
His name was 9.Gramsci. And while he was a Marxist, he knew the classic theory was missing a huge piece of the puzzle. He could see that in Western countries, the ruling class didn't just have batons and prisons to rely on. They had something much, much more powerful.
And you've got to understand, Gramsci wasn't some academic locked away in an ivory tower. He was a political activist, right in the thick of it. He was arrested by Mussolini's fascist regime in 1926, and it was from that prison cell that he wrote his famous prison notebooks, trying to figure out why revolution failed in the West and what made the capitalist state so darn resilient.
And the answer he landed on was a single game-changing concept, one word that would reshape political theory forever. That word was hegemony.
So what in the world is hegemony? Well, Gramsci argued that the most effective form of control isn't coercion, it's leadership. It's when the ruling class gets the people they rule to actually consent to the system. It's power that works not through violence, but through culture, ideas, and values.
And here's the key. Hegemony is achieved when the values of the dominant class become so widespread, so normal, that they just feel like common sense. It's when their particular way of seeing the world becomes the way of seeing the world, for everyone, even for the people who are actually held back by that system. So how is this common sense built? Gramsci pointed to what he called the institutions of civil society. Think about schools, the media, churches, all of it. These act like channels, constantly pumping out the values and norms that make the current system seem natural and right. Over time, people internalize these ideas, they consent to the system, and voila, dominance is secured, often without a single shot being fired.
So, to be really clear, Gramsci didn't throw Marx's ideas away. He built on them. Classical Marxism focused on the base, the economy, and the force of the state. Gramsci said, yes, but you're forgetting the superstructure, the whole world of culture and ideas. For him, domination was force plus consent. He showed that the battle for hearts and minds, fought in civil society, was every bit as important as controlling the factories.
But here's the really crucial part of Gramsci's thinking. If hegemony is something that's built, something that's actively maintained, well, that means it can also be challenged. It can be broken.
Gramsci argued that in the West, you couldn't just have a frontal assault on the state, what he called a war of maneuver. That state was protected by this massive fortress of cultural beliefs. So first you had to fight a war of position. This is a battle of ideas. It's about building a counter-hegemony, creating your own alternative media, your own schools, your own culture, to challenge the dominant common sense and win people over to a new way of thinking.
So you see, the ultimate goal isn't just about taking over the government buildings. The real revolution, the one that lasts, is about changing how society thinks. It's about creating an entirely new culture, a new set of values, a new common sense for a whole new world.
So there it is, Gramsci's secret. Real, enduring power isn't just about force.
It's about shaping what we believe is normal, natural, and possible. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. Where do you see common sense at work in your world today? And maybe more importantly, whose interest does it really serve? Thanks for tuning in.